And just so you know, if you haven't figured out already, if you have small kids, you don't want them hearing this, this is a good podcast to listen with earbuds or just at a separate time because we're going to talk. Everything's on the table to be able to be talked about. So there's your little trigger warning.
This is the Hanging On Podcast, and your hosts, Nagme, Melody, and Anna.
Hello, friends. Welcome to another episode of Hanging On Podcast. Today, well, first, before we get into that, you'll see Nagame and I taking turns speaking into the microphone because our microphone, well, actually, our computers are also in menopause and in the later stages of life, and they're wanting to quit. So we've been told our audio, we need to take turns. Look at that face. It doesn't look like end of life. we are Today's going to be a fun topic. Well, I think it's funny. Well, that's not true because they're serious too. I am really doing a special job on this intro as normal. Let us start over. Hello, friends. Today we are going to talk about sex. And how do you have those conversations with your kids? Have we been laughing beforehand? Yes, we have, and my stomach muscles hurt. But it is time to get serious and start fanning yourself because it's about to get uncomfortable in here. Well, depending on who you are. So, to start off with my little co hosts, sorry, I'm trying to multitask.
I have your questions here.
Thank you. My screen keeps shutting. And so, there we go. I want to know from my friends, did you find it first of all, do you recall talking to your kids about sex? And was that something that scared you? Melody should go first.
Yes, I had the talk with my kids and it didn't scare me. I think the challenging part was just wanting to come across sincere and to ensure that my children felt that the conversation had zero shame, zero embarrassment. I wanted it to come across as factual, but there was still a high level of confidence between myself and them, and then, removing the awkwardness. That was a big part of the conversation for me.
That was probably a whole different vibe than what I brought to my house. That was very sweet and intellectual. And I don't know if you'll find this hard to believe, but I brought props to my conversation. Did you have props?
Do we have the props here on the podcast?
Why did I not think to
We
bring
had to give away
props?
the props.
What was your prop?
2 rabbits.
You brought rabbits to the conversation.
Ask my son.
Dang, I wish your son was here.
So, because I was born in the Middle East and come from the Middle Eastern culture, I wasn't told anything. So when I started bleeding, I was like, "What the heck is happening to
Oh,
me?" And then on my wedding night, I didn't know what was gonna happen. And so I had zero talk about anything with my mom. And my mom, I was, any parent, but my mom, we came to the US and she went through really bad depression and culture shock. So she was kind of checked out. When I became a teenager, she was in her own little journey. But for my kids, I wanted to do it right. So about 7 years ago, before knowing, like realizing how toxic the purity movement thing was, I did passport to purity with my daughter. And that was really good. Now I see there's some areas I have backtracked with her and being like, it's never on you. If so, like, because it can put a lot of the pressure on the woman staying pure and like, what the purity movement did. But in general, the passport to purity was good. So I did that and they had like puzzles, they had different things that it was good. I did that with her. With my son, of course, I'm a single mom. I was like, I had no idea. And a few years had passed. And so I just kind of, he kept saying, "We haven't had the talk, mom. Are you gonna take me?" Because I took Rebecca to a hotel and we had the talk. We had overnight. We did all this stuff. And we had 2 rabbits at that time. And I said, "Come here, son. Let me share with you how this works." And he's been traumatized ever since.
That's that's funny that I'm sorry, it's
Oh,
not f I gotta
not for him.
I can't help it. I find almost everything in life funny, okay? I'm not gonna be ashamed of that. It is funny to me.
So what was
And
your
so
thoughts?
well, first of all, I gotta say that is very fascinating how you reference being in the Middle East, and that kinda goes with what initiated this podcast idea was some conversations Nagme and I had while driving one day. I had shared when we were in Iraq, we were at a Christmas, we were having hosting a Christmas party at our house for all the workers. And I had a migraine that day, so I told my husband I wasn't going to come downstairs. I was just in a lot of pain. And he's like, "Hey, the ladies really want to say hi to you. They want to come up and say hi to you." And, you know, um, I was like, "You know how I keep my bedroom. I'll come down to them." So I go downstairs, um, and started, just sharing. And but this was the interesting part. And the lady said, "We could never share with our husbands that we have a headache or that we don't feel well." I said, "That's so sad. Why?" And they said, "We all of the ladies there said, "We are all scared they will get second wives." And so in Islam, in the Quran, men are allowed up to 4 wives. And one lady came over and shared, there is a point to this. A lady came over and shared, she's like, "Well, they just can't get second wives for, any reason. But like, let's say, for example, you can't have kids, then they can have another wife." And I said, "But how do you know you can't have like, you're the reason you can't have kids,
Not the man.
not the man." And so they were all confused, like they had had 0 sex education, and to realize that, it could be a problem with the woman's reproductive, parts, or it could be a problem with the man. And so and just, if you haven't figured out already, if you have small kids, you don't want them hearing this, this is a good podcast to listen with earbuds or just at a separate time because we're going to talk, everything's on the table to be able to be talked about. So there's your little trigger warning that should have been done at the top, but Anna's leading this session and that's how she rolls. You get it when you get it.
Better than now than
Better late than never. And so the fascinating part was they weren't aware that sometimes I said, "But what if it's the man?" So him getting a second wife, it's just going to bring the problems with you. That's not going to change anything. And they really did not understand and were curious, like, "What do you mean?" And so here at the Christmas party, I am explaining about sperm count, and so I was like, "You realize the man, he produces sperm in his testicles." And so, like, I am just going giving them the full thing. And so if he does not produce enough swimmers, it doesn't matter how many wives he has. And so what was funny was a lady, we were at, another Westerners worker's house that night, and, this is a woman who has daughters, and, they people may have been laughing at me that I'm giving a sex talk in the Middle East at a Christmas party, and they're like, "What were you doing?" I walked over, and all of a sudden, I hear Anne talking about sperm swimmers, and I said, "I was sharing Jesus. You mean you don't include that in your gospel message?" Because they were totally into it, and it actually did lead to sharing Jesus. But this is the long story of an interesting part. One of the mothers of daughters, um, I'm sorry, how's it? Is the sound okay?
ours is okay. There's
Okay,
something else.
sorry. One of the mothers heard me talking about what I was talking about, and how sex works, and the women, the vagina and penis, and I'm just speaking matter of factly. And this one mom who has daughters went running out of the kitchen, closing her ears, saying, "Anna, don't speak about those things. Don't speak about those things." And was just so embarrassed. And, although, some of us, were like, "Oh," laughing. But the more I thought about, I actually was very sad because she is a mother, and how we were raised affects things. So no shame, no guilt on her. Um,
Mm.
but it made me think about how important these conversations are to have with our kids, because if you react that way, you are teaching your kids there is something that we are not allowed to talk about. There's something that you just never bring up. And I just don't believe that is of God. And how Nagame and I, we were talking that day about it that day. I said, I am just so passionate for, to help moms in this area because God created sex. It was all his idea. It was no one else's but his. And that we really need to take back the microphone from the enemy, Satan, because he should not be leading the conversation on sex. Your kids' school friends should not be leading the conversation on sex. And oh my gosh, absolutely, this phone should not be what teaches them about sex. And so that is what actually initiated this podcast idea, is let's talk about what was our experience. So it's going to be a part 1, part 2. And part 1 is us moms just talking about our experience. And don't worry, friends, we will be bringing in an expert to
On a different episode.
on a different episode. Thank you for clarifying that. On a different episode. So there'll be kind of like a part 1, part 2, and for her to give her feedback. So that's what started it, this conversation. And
And
I
I
love
think
that.
Yeah, and I think for me, I think the bigger picture is also, especially with a porn-infested,
Mhm.
world, when you don't know what healthy is, and what unhealthy is, then you're setting up your kids when you're not having those
Right.
conversations. I've had to have conversations about porn with my daughter and with my son,
Mhm.
and we become comfortable talking about it. I think when you don't have those conversations, then for me, what happened, I didn't know anything. And so later, after my marriage was over, I realized, wow, I was sexually abused. Like, because my husband was into porn, a lot of the things that he was telling me was normal. And it wasn't, it was actually not according to God's plan of how I should have been treated. Yeah, so I think once we learn, when we can talk about it to a biblical perspective to our kids, then they can actually recognize what healthy and unhealthy is.
100%.
exactly. And I believe, if obviously you're at whatever stage you're at, can't change that. But if we happen to be capturing any young mamas with the young kids, I would encourage you just from day one, don't make it some scary taboo subject. How my conversation came up, it was actually, I thought, pretty funny. It was our children's pastor had actually just announced to the children's church that his wife was pregnant and gonna have a baby. And thankfully, I had already been reading up on a book. It's an old book called A Chicken's Guide to Talking Turkey, I think. And that's where the props idea started. And then we took it from there. But what was so funny is my husband's a fireman, so he can be gone for days. And so it can't be one of those things where I'm like, just ask your father. And the whole thing about making it comfortable and not awkward is just talking about it like regular conversation in the moment, not like, "Oh, that's a very serious question.
Right.
Wait till," of like, "Sure, let's sit and talk about it." And I happen to have a balloon and a straw, and it really makes a really good prop to help explain just a regular balloon, because I don't know why I didn't think to bring it here. But it has the thick part and then it comes down. which would show the vagina, and then I can't remember if they suggest or I brought a straw to represent the boy parts, how, they're gonna be able to enter in and then the sperm goes and you guys know how it all works,
Yeah.
so I'm gonna assume. But I actually had the props, and so it's easy for him to visualize without, having to and how the uterus will expand and there'll be a baby. And what was so funny is when it came time to talk, that was my oldest, when it came time to talk to the brother and sister, my oldest said, "Mom, when we talk about it with them, can we get those little capsule dinosaurs that you put in water and they'll grow to like make a water balloon?" And I was like, "That's a great idea." And so we added for, round 2 the little dinosaur capsules. But what was so funny was I don't get embarrassed about talking about sex like out here, but having my kids ask about personal situations and experiences, that was the part I was dreading. So even as I'm having this talk with my oldest, I'm like going through the okay, very, just anatomically, this is how things work. And I was ready for him to be disgusted when he goes, "That's what you and dad do?" Like, I'm prepping myself for the embarrassment. And so at the end, he gets a look of disgust and he goes, "Oh my gosh, is that what Pastor Dave did?" And I said, "Son, mama's gonna laugh for a minute, but not at you, okay?" I went, "Yes, son, that is what Pastor Dave did."
So fun.
And did I tell Pastor Dave and his wife the look of disgust on my son's face? Yes, I shared it with them, and it was very memorable. And so that was our first recollection of the how it works.
How old were your kids?
He was probably in first or second grade.
Okay. Melody, is there a certain age you told your kids?
I was kind of waiting for it to be brought up, which going back, I probably would have changed because if we're not having the conversation with our kids, they're still having the conversation. So we have to decide at what point are we entering the conversation. I would have started it sooner, but I think my daughter was 4th grade and my son was maybe 3rd grade. And they seemed to know some things already.
And unfortunately, with cell phones, you have to start even earlier and earlier. Um, in my opinion. And I like what you said, Melody, because now my other son, he was just never one to ask questions, like ever. He's more like me. We don't question the why of things. We're more just "It's the way it is." And so I remember my daughter asking first, and I think she was in 3rd grade, and my son hadn't asked questions yet.
And he was older.
Yeah, or maybe she was in 1st grade because I think he was in, like, 3rd or 4th grade, and he had just never asked any questions, and so when my daughter asked questions, I told we were actually packing for a trip. I said, "You know what? We're packing right now, but I'll tell you what, as soon as we get on the road, we'll have that talk." And I told her, I was like, "Hey, and we're gonna make your brother listen because I don't think he's ever gonna ask me any questions. So we're just gonna bring him in and make and make him listen." And so I ran out to the store and got the little dinosaur egg and everything, and that's how that worked. But that's a very good point because there's just some kids, if you wait for them, they're just never gonna ask that question.
Melody, why do you regret having not, I guess, shared with your kids sooner until they had learned some things? Like, what do you think the damage is? And why is it so important to have the sex talk? So, we're doing an episode on this. Why is it so important to young moms, especially? And why is it that you regret that they had already heard some things?
Well, in my perspective, the subject is cloaked in dignity. It's nothing, there shouldn't be any shame, there shouldn't be any, you know, it shouldn't be hush hush or secretive necessarily. And so I feel like because I hadn't introduced everything to my children personally, they already started to develop these things. They were just whispers on the playground or things that they might have picked up from social media. And that kind of creates this underbelly or a darkness or um, sneaky feeling about it. And versus wisdom, truth, kindness, empathy, all of those things are very important to me. And also that I would be a source of those things. So when my children have questions about this or any other subject that may be, um, you know, approached with delicacy, I want to feel like they can come to me without any hesitation. And so I should have built that bridge and been forthright about it. Now, when the opportunity arose, I think what I shared was received really well. There was no like hesitancy on their part. But thinking back, I would have built the bridge of kindness, dignity, empathy. These subjects are of importance to me as much as it's a curiosity to you, that kind of thing.
Yeah, recently I just saw a little clip from Sheila Gregory. I know you have said you really like her.
I do.
Um, she does Bare Marriage, and
Hmm.
she wrote a book. What is it called? About sex. Uh,
She Deserves Better, The Great Sex Rescue.
A Great Sex Rescue is the first one, and then She Deserves Better is for more of, like, the younger, like, your daughters.
Correct.
But, recently I saw a little clip of her, of she made that she was talking about how in the Bible, she always thought God was embarrassed because it said,
Mm,
"And Abraham knew Sarah." Like, why doesn't
true.
it just say, like, Abraham had sex with Sarah? And she opens it up really well. She talks about it's actually because intimacy is supposed to be about a knowing, not a using, not a and I think that's also important for our kids to know. It's something God created. It's like a deep intimacy of knowing each other. It's not someone getting gratification from using another person to fulfill themselves, where it's a mutual knowing and going deeper with each other. And that's just, in the sexual aspect. But it was really interesting. Even that little clip I saw, I was like, yes, I always wondered why the Bible says no, maybe, God didn't wanna say the word sex, but it really is a knowing, and I think that should be part of the sex talk because for me, I was getting used, and
Mhm.
I didn't know that's bad, and I was treated harshly as literally as an object, and I didn't know that was bad. I was told very vaguely in the Christian world I was raised in that I'm supposed to please my husband, so what does that
Yeah.
look like? And I wasn't ever told about anal sex and people addicted to porn wanting that, and what is that? Is that biblical? Is that not? Is the line being crossed? And so I think those are conversations we have to have with our kids.
Yeah. The objectification is such a strong part of our culture now. And not only do we see it with pornography, but we see it with a lot of males who give themselves permission to objectify women publicly, even. The catcalling I mean, some of this is historically popular, but I just see it more, and it's like it's just toxic, and women feeling like it's unsafe to walk around in an outfit next to a construction site, for example. I mean, these are ongoing things, but I myself have experienced objectification. Walking in downtown San Diego, I was slapped on the rear. And, I defended myself a little bit, but this is a man thinking he's complimenting me. This isn't like even like was there is any hesitancy on his part that he could be committing an unsafe act? No, I don't think so. And just teaching my son how to have a perspective of non-objectification and teach my daughter that she can have self-respect and not be responsible for men committing inappropriate acts or inappropriate words in her direction.
That
Mm.
Wow, that is really
I think that's the detail. Like, do you want you really wanna when you teach about when you say the sex talk, it's not just the mechanics, that's
it's
really
Right.
not.
important, but it's about the detailed God the where we were created and how we're supposed to be honored.
And those are the conversations that I would have with my kids throughout
Mhm.
just their whole life
Mhm.
under my roof. That was like the kickoff one, but I would talk about the effects of porn. And I
Right.
also like Nagme. I did not know really anything about sex. And so my husband, who was raised on porn from
Mhm.
his father, he would just leave magazines out on the coffee table. Not my husband, his father. So his young mind was raised on porn, and I know how much that affected our life and our marriage and the devastating consequences of it. And that man led me to the Lord, so I trusted him to teach me and show me. And as Nagme said, you're asked to do things that are not of God and are straight out dangerous and harmful for your body. And that is why I wanted to share with my daughter. I want because I had sat across the table of so many young moms who in tears would just say like, "Oh my gosh, my husband always wants anal sex. It hurts." And they're just weeping in pain and for the first time hearing them be able to hear a Christian woman saying, "It's okay to say no." And in fact, you can let your husband know, should you try that again, I am leaving the room every time. Like you the consequence of you not
Respect.
treating and respecting me as a daughter of the most holy king, you've lost access because I was not designed to be treated that way. Your body wasn't treated that way. And I would share with those young moms and my daughters. I know not everyone will agree with this, but in my opinion, God naturally gave us lubrication in two places. Um, it's I'm just talking real. And you know what's good about this? I know it will be shocking for some people to hear someone speaking so openly, but I will continue to do it because of the phone calls I get, the pull asides that I get in Bible study, or not even pull aside, just straight up asked in the middle. I got asked by one young mama, "How is your vagina? I'm supposed to get a hysterectomy and I'm really scared it's going to change my vagina." And I could report my vagina is awesome. You do not have to worry about that. And so, but that that was cultivated in that Bible study, that there is nothing under the sun that cannot be discussed. And it creates a safe environment. And I always wanted my daughter and my sons to have a safe environment. And they would talk to me and even my sons. And then there was some things I'd be like, well, because I'm not a man, you know what? That's a great question for your dad. I'm sure he could give you some great insight on that. But talking about regretting not talking about something sooner, I was actually writing my book at the time, and I was writing about the anal sex part about sitting across the table. And it was funny is that week I had been praying about how am I going to, how do you bridge that into a conversation? If they don't even know that exists, they won't know to ask. And even that, as open as I am, I was like, Lord, how am I going to bridge that gap? And it was so funny. And that is like the importance of prayer, of every conversation. Like, God is so good, the power of prayer. I prayed, God, how am I going to I want to talk about anal sex with my daughter because there are young girls who are needing colostomy bags because of tearing. And so it's a conversation that needs to be had. But Lord, help me how to bridge that. And that had been my prayer. And so I'm typing in my book about this topic, and my daughter happened to walk up and asked, "Mom, what are you writing about now? Like, what part of my book am I on?" And I was like, "Funny you should ask." And we had the conversation. And to my surprise, this was when she was in 6th grade. She goes, "I've heard about that, Mom." And this was years ago, and it only gets worse. So she goes, "Mom, there was a video going around school of that. Like all the kids were talking about it, a video just going around on their phones." And she goes, "There's some girls in my class who feel like they're virgins because they only have anal sex." This is in the 6th grade, I'm so bad at math. 10 years ago, over 10 years ago. And that just broke my heart that there's little girls who don't have moms that they can talk to, and so they're believing little boys who are having their minds trained by porn talked into these things. And that's why it's so important to have this conversation. And I even love, I just think of the scripture. We can do all things through Christ Jesus who strengthens us. And that means even talking about the uncomfortable topics of sex.
Yeah. I mean, God is pretty open about it in the Bible.
Mhm.
There's times where you have to like censor for kids certain parts, but I think it is important. And also I think it's important to have the porn talk with boys and girls.
Mhm.
I really focused on my son knowing how dangerous it was and how it was worse than a meth addiction and it was going to ruin his life. And we really had that conversation and it's been good. But I didn't realize, not that my daughter has struggled, but my daughter has shared with me that a lot of her girlfriends have struggled with watching porn. And so I would I would say don't just focus on um having the porn conversation with your son. I would also have it with your daughters. For me, the focus was really on my son. So,
That's a really good point. There's it really good. I've been following, I don't think it's a Christian website, Fight the New Drug. And it always has really great articles about porn addiction. And what I do like about that is it it sells you on the dangers of porn without bringing God into it, which there's plenty reasons for with God. But I just wanted, knowing what a big problem is, I wanted to throw everything at it. And that's how you teach your kids to self-protect. Because if you're like, "I have filters on my computer, I don't have to worry about that." They are going to find there is going to be a time in their life where they come across it. But if you have gotten their buy-in, then they're going to self-protect. And that's for me what the goal should be is you have don't just go after the action, go for the heart
mhm.
to get their buy-in.
Yeah, I've developed a catchphrase with my children where if I suspect there's some sort of temptation happening, I'll just say, "Are you using discernment?" And then they'll contemplate how they're using the discernment, and we'll talk about it. But we need to give them permission to see something and ask themselves, is this right for me? Is this good for my eyes, my ears? The music that they're listening to is terrible. I mean, my kids aren't listening to terrible music in my presence, but the music that's being produced today is terrible.
Ooh, yeah.
And that is just in parallel with the content they're introduced to, on a regular basis in social media or online. So when you come across these things, and maybe they come across in different ways, conversationally too, but you can ask yourself, is this good for me? Is this edifying? Is this uplifting? Is this good for my soul? Is this good for my relationship with God? Should I
Yeah,
entertain this?
that's a big one.
It's so it is so true. And like I said, I love how science catches up with God's wisdom. God knew from all that's why it says don't look at a woman lustfully. And it goes for women as well. But because it starts with the eyes. And I'd always try to explain to my kids, porn is like a drug, and you're gonna need something. It don't whatever you see, it's only gonna work for a little bit, and then you're gonna need something more novel, more out there. And the next thing you know, you are gonna be so farther than you ever thought you would be down that road. And
Yeah.
you are what's going to turn you on are things that used to disgust you. And that's just human nature. That is what will happen. And it was meant to be honored between a husband and wife, and there's health there. And I remember when my husband, before God radically transformed his life, I'd put up boundaries. And one time he goes, "You have to admit the sex is better with porn, like more intense." And I started to struggle with it because my husband always, wanted to watch it, and we were watching it, and it was really starting to cause me to struggle in my mind, and I really wanted to clean it up. But I remember when he asked me that, he's like, "You gotta admit, it's better. It's, like, more intense and exciting." And I was like, I hear doing cocaine is really intense and exciting, but I think you'd have a hard time making an argument that's a great habit we should continue, the unnatural synthetics, everything, we're it's big in the news right now, the maha with the dyes and the
Mm.
all the chemicals that are supposed to take what was natural and like intensify it, for a greater bodily response.
But it's bad for you.
But it's bad, it's killing you. And that is what porn is for the sex life. It actually kills you. It kills the relationship. And God knew that. And what like I said, science is proving it now. I read an article not too long ago how erectile dysfunction in young men is like so it's like they've never seen this before. It's such an issue for like 18, 20-year-olds having erectile dysfunction. And they're, attributing a lot of it is because of porn use. The natural God intended way no longer satisfies you. You've lost your appetite for the natural. And I can just relate, it'll sound silly, but it's actually the same. I never thought I liked blueberries my entire life, but I've been doing clean eating, and when you get all the garbage out of your life, you're like, "Oh my gosh, these blueberries are amazing.
Mm.
These strawberries are amazing. It tastes like candy." And so it's just beautiful to see how God, he made us, he created us, and he knew how to best protect us and to thrive in health. And so
True.
that's what the conversation just wanted to have this conversation about. And but before we wrap up, there is one more topic I wanted to hit that I just feels also very important. How do you protect your kids against predators? I love,
Yes.
Melody, how you shared your experience on the street, to have those conversations with your kids. Um have you had any of those conversations with your kids of how do you protect them from unsafe people or adults?
There's some devastating statistics about the number of females who experience abuse and the number of males who experience abuse. I think for females, it's one in, or yeah, 1 in 3, and then for males, 1 in 10. Is that right?
It sounds pretty. I mean, I haven't looked at the statistics in years, but it was running that way. And I know when I led Bible study years ago, over gosh, 15 years ago in California, we talked about this. It was probably a room of 15 women, and it was just me and one other lady who hadn't been sexually abused.
Mm,
That's it.
terrible.
And so, uh,
I think it's been a topic that I have felt passionate about, so I have approached it with my children. And it's not just sexual abuse, it's emotional abuse as well that I've approached with both of them, and I have, shared that, it's rampant, and it doesn't come from a dark alley. I mean, it can, but more often than not, this happens between adults the children know and usually trust. Maybe it's a loving adult-child relationship. And so, abusers don't always look scary. They look familiar. In fact, you know, th- they they trust these people. And so that's what I've really emphasized is for my children is that you know, you don't have to even touch someone if you don't want to. If you don't want to hug an adult, that's okay. You could give a high five or you could acknowledge someone with politeness. I always expect politeness, but physical contact is not a must. And I've told my children about our instinctual feelings of discernment towards adults. If you get this left field feeling that someone is unsafe, trust it. It's okay with me that it's uncomfortable, that, this person that I think is okay, you don't feel is okay, and we should talk about it. You need to approach me and say, Mommy, I get a bad feeling about that person. And I will listen to you and I will believe you. And creating that open conversation and maintaining it, nourishing it, bringing these things up in conversation has been really helpful, for my kids. And even warning my son, there are women who will try to manipulate you, and there are women who will um, violate your trust and then make false accusations. So you have to live above reproach. Both my children are aware, living above reproach so that they can't be falsely accused or in a situation where they're being harmed.
I love that. You have had some great conversations with your kids, and I love how you said, trust that instinct. When we were in the car ride that day, I'd shared with my oldest, we had gone to a church, church for a Christian concert, and my son was probably in the 5th grade around that time, still pretty young. He had come out of the bathroom and he looked really scared, the men's bathroom. And I was like, "Son, what's wrong?" And he's like, "I don't know. There's just this man in there." And he just really made me feel uncomfortable. And my son had never done this before, and he was like, I was just really scared of him. And then we go into the concert and the youth pastor gets on stage and starts sharing and he goes, "Mom, that's that guy." And I had asked my son, "Did he touch you? Did he do it?" And he didn't. He just said something, really scared him about that. And he goes, "I must have been wrong because, it's the youth pastor." I know, because of what we see today. This was before Julie Royce
Hmm.
and the internet. So it was, you know, a different era. But I told my son, I said, "No, honey, I don't care if it's a pastor, a fireman, policeman, family member, whoever. You listen to that. And we don't falsely accuse people. So, I said, we don't know, because nothing had happened, doesn't mean that they're a bad person necessarily, but for whatever reason, that's the Holy Spirit telling you, I do not want you to connect with that person. And you respect that feeling and you keep your distance from that person. And that's something God had to show me because I was such a people pleaser.
Mhm.
I would be like, "Oh, I don't want to hurt someone's feelings." And there was a neighbor like that. I was like, "Oh, but they know we're Christians, and if I'm not friendly," but I would just catch him staring, and this was many years ago when I was not just menopausal hot. I would it it was just very uncomfortable, and I remember, like, the Lord convicting me about being a people pleaser. Because I would be like, "Oh, it's not Christian of me not to, engage in conversation with him." And to and just to have to go, "No, that's the Holy Spirit, and
Mhm.
that's okay." And I would even share with my girlfriends with kids, my husband and I always held big boundaries because I did although I wasn't sexually ab abused, I had some close calls in my time with my friends' family members.
Mhm.
And so I would always tell my friends, "Hey, if their friends came over, I'd be like, I if I need to go I'm gonna need to go to the store. Like my husband's home. Just let everyone choose their own comfort
Mhm.
level." And so I have a family member who unfortunately, I should just kept it as someone. There was some abuse. And so she is very uncomfortable with males playing with her kids
Mhm.
in, like anywhere where it's not in a public
Setting.
setting. And she really appreciates about me because she knows I don't take that personal. And I said, "Oh, I'll make sure no males in our family, none of my sons, son-in-laws, husband, they will never follow your kids, anywhere." And
Respect her
respect her boundaries. And it was so cute because, you know, I just love the openness and that we need to respect each other's boundaries.
boundaries.
And like I said, my family member, it just brings such comfort because unfortunately statistically there's just a lot that goes on.
True.
So I just want to say the reason we're talking about all of this is because I think maybe generations before, if there was a sex talk, it was more about the mechanical, like this is how a child is made. But now, as there's pornography, there's sexual abuse stuff coming out with family members, with people in the church, there has to be a broader talk, and it might not necessarily be that one sex talk. Since the sex talk, like you said, there was a time where you brought up the anal sex, then there's a time where you brought up listen to that intuition, and so there might have been an initial talk, but it should be an ongoing conversation, and even maybe when they're married and they're uncomfortable in the way their spouse is treating them in sex or in certain situations, and they should be able to talk to you and say, "Is this normal? Is this?" And so the
Yeah.
sex talk, I think. Uh, is a broader of talking about porn and honoring your body and listening to your intuition and also it could be ongoing till they're adults and past adults and married and have kids, and the conversation should be um I mean, to the best of our ability as moms, we should pursue a relationship with our children that it can be an ongoing
Yeah.
conversation that they can be comfortable with asking us about throughout their adulthood even.
That's really important because and what I also love because when it comes to like the Christian circles, I may have had some older women kind of throw some shade, throw some shame my way, like, "You're too open, you shouldn't talk about these things." But God has always just reaffirmed, like, "No, this is how I intended it to be." And I've had a homeschool girl that I've known since a little girl, homeschooled, married now. Years ago, she called me because she's like, "My husband's doing these things. He's saying there's something wrong, like my genitals, they just aren't right." And she was just saying a lot of things where I'm like, "I think your husband has a porn addiction." And he was in school to be a pastor. And come to find out, he didn't know he had a porn addiction. He was going to strip clubs and doing meth and all these other things. And so imagine had she not had a safe person to go to. And so not even for our kids, but whoever um is in your life, just being that safe person. And I know working with refugee kids, I was always worried about them because they can be such easy targets
Mhm.
and they're so trusting. And so with my kids, I would always tell them, "Hey, even though I bring you to church or whatever, if there is a grown up, nobody should be touching your private parts. You can always come tell me. And just have that conversation with them. You are a child of God. You should be respected. And if they say, I'm going to hurt you if you tell anybody, that is the one time it is okay to lie. And you say, okay, I won't tell anybody. And you come tell Miss Anna, and
Or
we will get you protected.
or even I would tell my kids if someone says, "Don't tell anybody," that's the time you're gonna tell me.
Right.
No one should be telling you, "Don't tell anybody what's happening." So
And it's really great when you have these conversations. Just one more thing is my daughter. I always loved it in high school. She was friends with very conservative bunch of kids, LDS kids, and they all these girls were just saying, "Oh, I could never talk to my mom about that." And my daughter told me, she goes, "Oh, I told them, oh, I can talk to my mom about anything. My mom just says, you just make sure you want the answer and that I can ask her anything." And that really blessed me.
I was just remembering, I was thinking because one of the things I love about you, Anna, is like when you share Bible verses and things like that. And you're so transparent and you share things in the Bible that I never like looked at that way. I'm like, wow, God really did say that. Like it's just like God is very transparent. And but even with the sex stuff, like it's biblical. God is transparent with us. Like, don't have sex with animals. Like it's like he's not embarrassed to be like, this is right, this is wrong. And like I said with Sheila, like her little video clip, like even like details God puts in the Bible that Abraham knew Sarah, for example. Like God is telling it it's a deep knowledge of each other. It's not anyone using anyone else.
I just think that bringing God's love into the conversation is really important. God created us, He loves us the way we are. He created us intentionally. Our design is on purpose. All of this is normal. It's okay to have ongoing questions and, those types of things. The reason I bring that up is it just took me a long time to accept my humanness as a person. And I would question myself, doubt myself, and, be so unsure. And so I like to instill confidence in my kids of their intentional design and God loving them and just the way they are. Mm.
I love that. Mel, and I can't help it. I know I was wrapping up, but I forgot one question. Nagme kind of answered it at the beginning for her, but did your parents ever talk to you about sex?
Yeah, my mom did talk to me, and I she introduced the subject, and it was new to me, but I felt just remember feeling very uncomfortable.
You know, part of it is natural with that. Our family was just raised like we were raised in family where, well, obviously we laugh at everything and so humor, but serious conversation about sex, I don't really remember. There was joking and and that's where I had to grow. Like I always tell my kids, your greatest strength is your greatest weakness. It usually has a backsided weakness to it. And because I was raised in a very, you could laugh and joke about anything, that the Bible verse really stands out to me about, you should not have coarse jokes, and so, I try to stay away from, I don't like the sexual, you know, joke, jokes, per se. And so, but yeah, no one I didn't have, like, serious talks. I just remember when you started your period, my dad would bring you a flower, which was
Cute.
very sweet and stuff, but I found it embarrassing. I don't know why. And
Yeah.
so, um, that was
I think initially it is, and you have to move past that for both for the parent and the child. But you have to kinda get past that uncomfortableness and also I mean, it's probably uncomfortable getting it from your dad, a flower from your dad, but, Melody, you said you felt uncomfortable, with the sex talk with your mom, but I think we have to get past that, make it normal to talk about and also have a relationship with our children more than that. I mean, it's random if I am not having a good relationship with my child and jump in and be like, let's talk about anal sex.
Right. And it's I was raised in a different culture era. My parents did, I think, way better than their parents did. And yeah, so thankfully my kids, they say they liked how we did things, and my to this day my daughter's grateful that we had the conversations we had. And it's always in an educational way, not like I said, I don't like that, like movies with the sexual um coarse joking. And so, yeah. Anyways, I think I think we hit all our points, and I look forward to hearing. We're gonna have Tabitha back on. We've already released one podcast with Tabitha. If you haven't had a chance to check that out, you guys should check that out. She is just a wealth of information. Off the top of my head, I cannot remember what episode, but I think we should link it in the description box when we air this episode. And
And
yeah.
she's coming back to talk about, from a therapist, a counselor perspective on how to have a sex talk with our children. So we're excited for that interview. But if you want to leave comments, questions, it's hard being transparent of how, even when I shared how had rabbits, it's hard to be transparent of what you learned, what you were told when you were growing up, and how you did it, because then of course when it's in a public setting, people have their own opinions, and there's a lot of people not liking certain things. But it's good to just be able to talk about it and be able to have disagreements and say, I don't like that, this is the way I did it. And so we would like to hear from you, and how have you, or how do you plan to discuss it with your kids? And why do you think it's so important? Why is the sex talk so important, especially in a culture that's infested with porn and sexual addictions and abuse and all sorts of things? Why is that important to talk about with our kids?
I love that. And hey, guys, I'm not going to be too proud to say hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already. It sounds small, but it really does help support our podcast and the ministry that we feel God's called us to. So please share with friends,
Mm.
leave comments. It really does make a difference. So until next time, God bless you, Hanging On Podcast family, and we will catch you next time. Take care.
This has been the Hanging On Podcast. Make sure to like, rate, and comment. It'll really help. And we'll see you next time on the Hanging On Podcast.